Dunkirk is a war movie and is written and directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Harry Styles, Cillian Murphy, Tom Hardy, Mark Rylance, and Kenneth Branagh. And as you can see, I am joined by my good friend Mitchell. We both saw this movie and I think we can both agree we loved this movie. For those who saw my Interstellar review, I absolutely despise that movie. So with this film being the follow-up to Interstellar, Christopher Nolan had a lot to prove this time. And not only does he execute it exceptionally, but honestly, I think this is in his top 5 best films. So what did you think of the film, Mitchell?
I thought it was a very gritty, realistic portrayal of such a pivotal point in World War II. And it makes sense that Christopher Nolan had wanted to make this film for so very long.
First few things I want to bring up is the cinematography and the sound design. Both of these are the best part of the movie. This film not only looks great, but it is stunning to look at. And it's so refreshing as well that a majority of this film was practical. Everything you see is really there. There were only a few instances where I could see that there were a bit CGI there, but for the most part, this film was pretty much practical, and I really have to praise the film for that. And the sound design is fantastic. Every sound you hear sounds real. The first time you hear an incoming plane, that sounds terrifying to hear. What did you think of the cinematography and sound design?
Just as you said, the cinematography was fantastic. Absolute props to whoever was in charge of photography. And the sound design was so intricate. It was able to project a whole lot of large sounds while also keeping to the small little details, like them just breathing correctly, walking on the sand. That might sound a bit like I'm giving it too much credit, but it might surprise you how many films don't actually care enough for smaller sound mixing.
Yeah, and speaking of the sound, the music by Hans Zimmer is fantastic. And once again, Hans Zimmer knocks it out of the park. This is the best music in a Christopher Nolan film I have heard in a long time. The music always keeps you on your toes. The music always keeps you on the edge of your seat. And honestly, I would want to buy the soundtrack. But we don't want to be those people, but there are problems with this movie.
Very minor, of course.
Firstly, while the characters are portrayed good, at no point in the film did we ever feel like we gravitated towards them. Because honestly, there isn't that much character development between each character. Like, we know nothing about them, we don't know who they are, why they signed up to be in this war. We are given no insight into any of these characters. Like I said, they are performed perfectly, but who are these people?
It is unfortunate that we don't have as detailed of a character as in other Christopher Nolan films, although it does seem like the film is trying to serve a different purpose than just showing us actual characters, because we follow mainly 3 characters throughout this whole movie.
Yeah, the feeling I got from this film was the film wasn't about the characters, because you see a war film and what's the first thing you notice? The war film is centered around a character, and the film follows their struggles and how they deal with this, but those films forget to follow other characters and what they are going through. That's why this film feels so unique, because there is no character that is specifically highlighted. The film focuses more on the war aspect than the character aspect, but there are those moments where you feel like you're getting to know these characters a little bit. Because there's this thing with Cillian Murphy's character where you feel for him because he's experienced hell and he doesn't want to go back into the war.
And it is those small little moments that adds a lot of nuance into this movie. It isn't just necessarily good and bad. You get to see these small little mental struggles with suffering through such a calamity of a war disaster. Seeing Cillian Murphy, as the film puts it, shell-shocked, it allows the audience to understand how horrific war truly is, and allowing it to be an anti-war film and not just a big spectacle.
Something I have to give credit to the film is the film tells 3 separate stories that eventually tie together in the end. And I looked it up, and the film is very clever with this. They have one story that is set on the ground, they have one story that's set at sea, and then they have one story that's set in the air. And this, to me, I found to be very clever storytelling.
It's a very classic Nolan trope, as some people might put it. So if you look at a lot of his other films, such as The Dark Knight, there are scenes where cuts between three separate stories, building to a big climax in the scene, except this is now expanded into an entire movie, and it works astoundingly well.
That's another thing I have to praise, the writing of this film. For those who follow my reviews of Christopher Nolan's films, I go on and on about how pretentious his writing is. Thankfully, the writing in this film is nowhere near as pretentious as, for example, Interstellar, because the film does this thing where there's very little dialogue. There isn't much talking throughout the film. It's very much visual storytelling. And I also liked how this film wasn't a 2.5 hour long ass movie. So the fact that they kept this movie at 100 minutes and they're still able to keep the audience interested, and at no point in the film does the film ever become boring. It never has a dull moment. Once the film starts, it's all go from there.
Yeah, the pacing in this film is absolutely exceptional. The way they edited the scenes together allowed us to reach the climax of the scene before cutting to another part of the story. Very classic storytelling, but effective nonetheless.
Yeah, for the most part, I liked the editing, but there were a few instances where the editing felt a bit off. Like, this is one particular scene where a plane's coming in, shooting at a boat, and then the next shot, that exact same plane is on fire. Did we miss something? And it's small editing goofs like that that kind of hurt the film a little bit.
Yeah, especially when there was one part where the color grading between a cut seemed very off, because you have this very overcast setting, and it's very dark and grey, but then you cut over and there's a lot more brightness on the beach with the commanding officer in the shot. It is a little immersion breaking, but it's not something that I feel mainstream audiences will worry about.
Overall, this is the best Christopher Nolan film I've seen since The Dark Knight, and honestly, I think this film is better than The Dark Knight. This film nails everything. It nails the direction, it nails the acting, it nails the cinematography, it nails the music, it nails the sound design. This was a technical masterpiece. This is one of the rare films that's come out of 2017 where I actually felt for this film. And I was invested into this film as I wanted to see what was going to happen. But yes, small little problems with this film hold it back a little bit.
For me, Christopher Nolan has really shown how well he can direct a honestly not very thought-provoking movie, but a very well-made war movie. Personally, it is not my favourite film of him. Memento still holds a bit higher than that.
Same.
And over time, you can definitely see the progression with Christopher Nolan's film as he goes more and more into large blockbusters. However, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if we're going to get large blockbusters each year, I'm glad that they are in the hands of directors like Christopher Nolan.
And not Michael Bay.
So for me, despite small editing mistakes and characters that didn't really grasp me, this film is one of the best war movies made, and it's definitely a film you should see in cinemas. And I would be giving it a 9 out of 10.
This is a film where even if you're not a die-hard Christopher Nolan fan, this is still worth watching. Because there are two ways to watch this movie, because this film can be seen as a blockbuster or a smart movie that anyone can watch. This is still a pretty solid movie, and I honestly think this is my second favorite film of 2017. And I'm going to give Dunkirk a 9.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, be sure to like my Facebook page, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to my channel below. I'm NETX5, and this has been Mitchell. Thank you for watching.